Today we are going to look into what food establishments are safer to eat in Boston through analysis and visualization of the data. So the question that we are going to answer today is, are Boston restaurants with takeout options less likely to violate health codes? So before I dig deeper into the analysis, I would give an introduction to the data. So this analysis would be a top down analysis of two different data sets. One is the food establishment data, what kind of restaurants are there in Boston, and what is the license type that they have acquired. And the other data set is the health code violations data for the state of Massachusetts, but we will drill down into Boston to test the insights and hypotheses to see if we can answer the question that's above. So the process we followed is, before getting into the process, this is what the violations data looks like. It has the name of the business, the violation dates, and the degree of violation, the description of violation, and other columns that we are not going to use in this analysis but could be very useful. For example, the location, to find what restaurants are safer, and define categories for safety for our own purpose. And this is the business's data uh, for the state of Massachusetts. But again, we'll dig down into Boston to see what zip codes have safer restaurants. So what we are going to do is, I have done some data manipulation because as you can see, this data is not grouped or not, it's in a plain tabular form, and I had to do some data manipulation to generate certain visualizations and graphs to answer the questions. So I have done the following to manipulate the data. About the data set type is table, data set availability is static, and the attributes that I've used are mostly categorical, except for two of them, which is number of violations and number of businesses, which are quantitative, and sequential, and these are derived. Why are we doing this analysis? The tasks that I have defined are to identify the cities, the zip codes, and with the highest number of violations and the highest number of establishments as well. So the task 2 would be to compare the number of establishments and the number of violations respectively for each of the zip codes according to the type of establishment, and then summarize the insights from the visualizations. And how I have achieved this is by visualizing the cities with violations for the state, then visualizing the Boston data for establishments as well as the violations. Sorry about that, and stacking and grouping data to visualize according to the zip codes into the column. So the two things that are taken in consideration are degree of violation and the type of establishment that is there. So jumping into the insights and conclusions, let's go through the insights. So this is the city-wise analysis of the state of Massachusetts. So we can see that the most of the violations, let it be 1 star, 2 star, or 3 star, the most of the violations in the state are in the state of Boston, in the city of Boston. And when we dig deeper into the zip code wise analysis of the violations, we can see that according to two types of restaurants, with takeout and without takeout, The zip code 02116 has the most number of violations, and followed by 0 to 115, 0 to 111, and so on. And if we look at the number of establishments that are there in those are, as we could have imagined, most in the 0 to 116 zip code, and then followed by surprisingly 0 to 215 and 0 to 114. From these two charts, we can see that the sizes of both the stacked bar charts for eating and drinking and eating and drinking with takeout look the same. The ratio seems to be the same. So which justifies that in the more number of restaurants, more number of violations will be there. But how do we compare this? We can see that the 0 to 108 to 0 to 116 and 0 to 110 and 0 to 115 have high number of food establishments as well as high number of violations, but it's not very clear that the takeout options have more or fewer violations in this case. So what can be done is we can parallelly look at the data, and if we look at the establishments data, we can in the zip code of 0 to 116 we can see the ratio is 8 to 3, which is 2.67, and these are the values for 0 to 114 and so on. And this is the number of establishments. And if you look at the violations, the ratios are 3 is to 1, 2 is to 1, 5 is to 1, 8 is to 3. So what do we get out of this? So this is number of restaurants for each category and the ratios for each zip code, and this is number of violations by those by restaurants for each category, which is eating and drinking versus eating and drinking with takeout. From this, what we can see is the violations ratio as compared to the number of establishments ratio is always greater, even though the number of restaurants with eating and dining, there are more in ratio. They have shown lesser violations in certain zip codes. This implies that it is very likely for the food establishments with takeout options to commit. It is very less likely to commit health code violations as compared to the restaurants which do not have takeout options. But is this enough to conclude that the food establishments with takeout are comparatively less place to? What about the other questions like comparison of these degrees of violations and when these violations were resolved? What establishments have a very high number of violations irrespective of the type of license applied? So what maybe we can look into is a comparison of two different charts. One is number of violations of each level of violation for the type of establishment, and the other one is number of violations for each type of establishment. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so that's the number of violations by each establishment for the type of the violation. So from the charts, which are not visible right now, we can see that the most of the violations are 1 star, followed by 3 stars, and then 2 stars. The overview would suggest that the restaurants without takeout have a smaller bar which means they show significantly lesser violations, but this information cannot be used to conclude that the restaurants without takeout have lesser number of three-star violations, let's say, because the ratio is not compared with the total number of restaurants that are there. So, following the process that we followed above, we can conclude that as well. So, in conclusion, we can say this analysis just a tip of the iceberg, which can lead to a deeper analysis, not just to know what places might be safer to eat, but also how safe. And this can also be a great area for food inspection agencies, which to find what areas of establishments to target to ensure food safety for the citizens of the city or the state. And yeah, that's pretty much it.